3 more job reports until the election. How you feel about your job is more critical than ever. Good morning, I'm Christine Romans. Mark Twain once said, "There are lies, damn lies, and statistics." Let me give you the statistics. The job market created 163,000 new positions, net new positions in the month of July, and the unemployment rate went up to 8.3%. When you dig into the numbers, you can see it's the private sector that's doing most of the hiring here, and it is the government sector that continues to lose jobs. When you look within the sectors, you can see that leisure and hospitality, 27,000 jobs created there. That's probably a sign that the consumer is still holding on. Those are low-wage jobs, though, if you're working in them. And in manufacturing, 25,000 jobs created, net new jobs. That's even with the headwinds from Europe. I want to dig into the numbers longer term because 1 month is just 1 month. The trend is so important when you're looking at the jobs market. This is that terrible, disastrous financial crisis and all the jobs lost, millions of jobs lost in that period. And this is the recovery, and this is what politicians fight about. This is the recovery here. You had a weak spot last summer, a weak spot this summer, and now a job market that's doing just a little bit better. So what are the politicians saying about it? I gave you the statistics. Here's the spin. The White House focuses on this: 29 months in a row of private sector job growth. The economy has now added private sector jobs for 29 straight months for a total of 4.5 million jobs during that period. And what about Governor candidate Mitt Romney and the Republican National Committee? They tend to focus on this. We've now gone 42 consecutive months with the unemployment rate above 8%. Both of them are right, by the way. I'm joined by CNN political director Mark Preston, Diane Swonk, chief economist at Mesirow Financial, and Peter Navarro, professor of economics at the University of California at Irvine and a director of the new documentary film Death by China. Mark, if the economy can do this 3 more times, President Obama will have gained back all the jobs lost at the beginning of his presidency. Does that get him reelected?
Well, you know, historically, or since World War II, a president hasn't been reelected with the unemployment rate over 7.4%. But as you point out, you know, he basically took office with the unemployment rate at 8.3%. That was in February of his first year in office. The question on voters' minds is exactly what you said. It's all about a trend line. It's all about people having hope and feeling that they're getting out of this bad economic situation. But they're also going to say to themselves, when does he become responsible for the economy? Is it 1 year in? Is it 2 years in? We've heard him over and over again, Christine, say he inherited this mess. At some point, though, he has to take responsibility for it, and that's what the Republicans are trying to attach to him right now.
You know, Diane Swonk, Mitt Romney is looking forward, and he's claiming he can create 12 million jobs over the next 4 years if he's president. That has happened before. It happened from 1996 to 1999. Millions of jobs were created. How do you create 12 million jobs over 4 years? Is it possible?
It's possible. It's not probable in this kind of economic environment. When you've come out of financial crisis and with the dysfunction in Washington, it's certainly not very probable at all. In fact, this sort of kicking the can down the road on the fiscal cliff and having that hanging over our heads, even if we avert it, there could be a downgrade in our debt, which would have long-term repercussions and stifle growth over the longer haul. So I think that, you know, to compare this, first of all, for anyone to come in with a silver bullet, if there was a silver bullet to be shot, it would have been shot already.
Right. And in economics, we want numbers, you know. We want statistics, not lies and damn lies. And quite frankly, when you're in the middle of an election year, people look at the numbers like this. Will they make them feel better about their personal situation, what they saw this month?
Actually, you know, I think, well, first of all, some of the month's data was skewed. The manufacturing data was skewed by the fact that the automakers didn't retool and shut down like they usually do in the month of July. And this auto sales haven't been that great, so there'll be some give back on that. The encouraging, almost all those leisure, actually more than all those leisure and hospitality jobs, they were actually in accommodations and eateries. So the rest of them were actually declines, museums and stuff. People aren't going to museums, they're not doing cultural stuff, but they are taking some discretionary vacations. That's good. But there weren't things like increased hours worked, the stuff you want to see that sort of is a signal of things going forward. And the unemployment rate, when you broke that down, the household survey, when you call people up, that really was a very nasty report. Yeah. So at the end of the day, the measure of our misery is the reality of 8.3% on the unemployment rate. It's the reality of a shadow unemployment rate in the double digits.
Right.
It's the reality that we've had people that are getting marginalized more and more in a cumulative way. And, you know, you can blame one person or the other, you can blame one party or the other. We got into this together. We need to get out of it together.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of bipartisanship. You know, Peter, I want to focus in on something that Diane just pointed out, that 25,000 manufacturing jobs added. There's this popular narrative that there's somehow this manufacturing comeback in the United States. Diane pointed out that it may have been fewer layoffs in, you know, temporary layoffs in the auto industry. What do you make of that?
Well, 25,000 new manufacturing jobs pales in comparison to the 6 million manufacturing jobs we've lost to China in the last 10 years. And the thing about manufacturing jobs is that they have the best multiplier for new jobs. So if you have one manufacturing job, you get 4 more in services. So if we lose 6 million manufacturing jobs to China, that's 24 million jobs that we've lost over the decade. And that's the problem here. I mean, if you look at the numbers, we have to create 300,000 jobs a month for 2 years just to drive that unemployment rate from 8% down to 5%. And the silver bullet here really, and what the politicians don't seem to understand, the silver bullet is getting our manufacturing jobs back onshore. We need to get Apple, Boeing, Caterpillar, Cummins, GE, GM, Ford. They need to produce here in America, and they can't do that as long as our biggest trading partner cheats. And I think we're really fooling ourselves here in this country if we think that the problem only dates back to 2007. It's a practical matter. For the last 10 years, we've grown at an annual rate of 1.6% GDP. 5.5 decades prior to that, we grew at 3.5% GDP. Now, one GDP point is 1 million jobs we create a year. So if we're losing 2 million 2 percentage GDP points a year, that's 2 million jobs.
Peter, listen to you talk about the last 20 years and using, a wide perspective. This is politics, right? In Washington, people think in quarters and election years, but that's really...
Well, yeah, and more importantly, the corporate types do, and I think you're right, but if, I think the candidate who's going to win in November is the candidate who takes this message to Ohio and Pennsylvania and Michigan. The best jobs program is not more fiscal stimulus, it's trade reform with China.
I'm not hearing much about trade reform on the campaign trail, I'll be honest with you. By the year 2020, almost a third of all American jobs will be low-wage, low-paying jobs. Peter Navarro, can the American middle class maintain a standard of living the way things are going right now?
Absolutely not. I mean, if you look at Germany, 25% of their workforce is in manufacturing. Here in America, it's down to 9%. We simply cannot generate a decent standard of living and a 3.5% GDP growth rate a year unless we have manufacturing. And I'm not talking about making T-shirts. I'm talking about things like making automobiles and aircraft and sophisticated medical equipment. We can do this here, but the problem we face in this country is that our biggest trading partner not only cheats in terms of illegal subsidies and currency manipulation, it protects its own markets. I mean, the idea it was like, oh, great, they got 1.3 billion people, biggest market in the world. It's going to be a gold rush. Fact of the matter is the Chinese won't even let us into their markets unless we surrender our technology. So this is a structural problem that we've had for 10 years now, and I would love to hear the White House, I'd love to hear Mitt Romney, I'd love to hear our congressional leaders start talking about the best jobs program is trade reform with China.
Let's bring Diane in, because you're from Detroit, right?
I'm an old Detroit girl. I'm an auto analyst at heart. That's where I grew up. This has been going on since the early 1980s. We actually had output increase in the auto sector, and the number of jobs decreased because productivity gains picked up. And we're seeing onshoring now because of some of the things Peter talked about. China cheats. People don't like it when they set up a manufacturing plant, and the next 6 months, China picks up all the technology and everything that they were making their profits on. All of a sudden, they give away. Wages are going up in China. All the things that are equalizers in China are now starting to repel people from China. Now we're selling a lot of cars in China that we're importing over there and also producing over there.
But is it enough to make a dent in, as Peter points out, the 6 million jobs that have gone?
Well,
is this just on the margin?
The 6 million jobs that have gone for several reasons. I mean, first of all, it was Japan Inc., and then, Honda set up in 1982 a plant in Ohio. We've got foreign manufacturers setting up plants. You now produce where you sell. We're getting very efficient at production, and where the job shortages are in the sort of, 18-month licensing sort of degrees, the machine tool, the jobs we never thought would exist in manufacturing again. That's where they're coming back.
What kills me about those jobs is when I talk to CEOs who work in those industries, they tell me they just can't find American workers who can do these jobs, and they're not going to invest in the training because the technology might change too quickly. It's like, what do you want? I mean, how can there be 13 million people out of work but nobody has any workers?
Well, it is interesting because the CEOs did not have to pay for education for a long time. We had an educational system that trained people to work in factories without thinking, and now they got to work in factories and think.
Right.
So that's where the difference is. The good news is we are seeing a ton of partnerships going on 18-month, private sector,
Right.
public sector partnerships with community colleges, state colleges.
We've profiled some of those, yeah.
And those actually are working, and those people are getting jobs. They're getting multiple job offers. The hit rate is very high. But, Boeing is training people to get six-figure jobs to work only on their equipment. Well, you're kind of stuck with their equipment, but it's a good job.
Mark Preston, let me bring you in for the politics of this. This doesn't really translate on the campaign trail, does it? Peter's right. You don't hear this carefully crafted language about how you're going to handle trade issues.
No, because it's not sexy enough. And what you will hear is them, certainly Mitt Romney has said it in the past couple of days, that he is going to be harder on China and make it more difficult. And he's going to sit down at the table with them and tell them that they have to, work better with us. But beyond that, people don't want to hear the bullet points. And they don't want to hear the bullet points because bottom line, they're trying to pay their mortgage. They're trying to put their kids through school. They're trying to save their jobs. They just want Washington to work correctly. They want President Obama or Governor Romney to deliver on the promises. But basically, when we talk about the unemployment rate, this macro number of 8.3%, it's very important. But the bottom line, Peter hit on it a little bit earlier, this is going to come down to swing states. This is going to come down to the unemployment rate when we get those numbers, shortly. What's the unemployment rate in Nevada? What's it in North Carolina? What's it in Ohio? And what is it in Florida? Because those are the key states that are really going to decide who wins the election.
In several of those key states, the unemployment rate is lower now than it was when the president took office. It'll be interesting to watch. Peter, Mark, Diane, thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Porque no tiene, porque le manda,